But we're going to kick things off with a story you may have seen topping our news bulletins and trending on your socials today. You may have seen that the law's changing to ban under 18s from getting married in England and Wales. Significantly, this ban includes things like religious marriage ceremonies carried out in temples and mosques. Before this, teenagers were allowed to get married at 16 and 17, but with parental consent. Campaigners say changes are needed to clamp down on forced marriage. Asian Network's Poonan Taneja has got more on this.
Next, the government says health workers have a key role in preventing forced marriage.
Police and border officials are cracking down on forced marriage.
Now to another big story for us, forced marriage and how they're cracking down on it.
Forced marriage is something we've talked about a lot on the BBC Asian Network. That's because about half of reported cases involve victims from South Asian communities. And over the years, some of you have shared your experiences with us.
I was taken abroad to get married to a man who was twice my age.
I was seen to be at risk of being taken to Pakistan and forced to marry a stranger.
Boys and girls under 18 make up a quarter of victims. But although forcing someone to marry against their will is a crime in Britain, Sara Browne from women's rights group IKWRO says existing laws don't go far enough.
We don't need to look at whether there was coercion or not. It's simply, is there a marriage on the cards? Is there a child involved? And that's what we're looking out for.
Under these new rules, children won't be prosecuted, but the adults who organise their marriage could face a fine or up to 7 years in jail. That's the case if they take them abroad to get married too. But what about 16 to 17-year-olds in consenting relationships who want to wed? Sara Browne again.
Just waiting 1 or 2 years until you get to the age of 18, balancing that small waiting time against the lifelong impact that we know child marriage has been having. I think we're very clear that this is the right change.
Leading the campaign is Payzee Mahmod. She and her sister were both married off by their parents at the age of 16. While she escaped her marriage, her sister Banaz was murdered in a so-called honour killing when she tried to leave hers. 3 years ago, Payzee spoke about it for the first time.
The sister of a victim of a so-called honour killing has spoken out about her death.
By speaking out, she hoped to bring an end to child marriage and crimes committed in the name of so-called honour.
The only way I could describe the last 13 years is it's just been practically hell. It's been just every day's been hell. Losing Banaz just doesn't make sense.
That's Payzee Mahmod, child marriage survivor and campaigner at IKWRO, a women's rights organisation, speaking to us about her sister Banaz for the first time. Payzee joins me now. Welcome to the programme, Payzee.
Hi, yes, hello. Thanks for having me.
No, pleasure as always to speak to you. That was 3 years ago, and understandably so. It's difficult and emotional to speak about Banaz, and it was the start of your campaign journey at the time as well. Just talk about why it's been so important for you to do this since then.
Well, as you mentioned, my sister's story has definitely stayed with me and touched me. And, I saw her experience of child marriage. And also, I personally experienced it at such a young age. I was just 16 and I was exposed to so many forms of abuse. And for me, that really was a drive. So when I had the opportunity to work with the organisation IKWRO and some of the other organisations that are working on this issue, it just felt to me like it was, it was the right thing to do, and that I had to do all I could to try and persuade decision makers and talk about what it was like to experience that right here in London. I think a lot of people don't actually think about it as it's something happening here. They may think of this as an issue that's happening far away from them and doesn't really concern them, but we're talking about children that you might just cross every day. I mean, I was going to college, I was, crossing my teachers, health workers, and actually no one ever picked up on the fact that I was a child and in a marriage.
And that's what I wanted to talk about before we talk about the legislation, the impact it had on you and your sister as well, to be victims of child marriage. And when you were so young, it must have been an awfully confusing time.
Yes, definitely. I mean, if you think about it, when you're 16, to have all of your rights taken away from you like that, and to be, controlled by somebody older than you, to be coerced into a relationship that comes with devastating impacts, it really is, it was a terrible experience, and something that I would say I'm still finding myself healing from today. It's not as I left a child marriage and I just suddenly, started a new life. Unfortunately, with child marriage, it has a devastating lifelong impact that girls are having to heal from and recover from. And I was very fortunate to get out of my child marriage, but in the case of many girls and my sister, it is sadly costing lives when girls are trying to escape child marriages.
Is forced marriage being a criminal offence for years but only a handful of prosecutions going to be something which people think, well, hang on a minute, is legislation the answer? Because there's a worry for those who feel as though this information and the correct message will take a long time to trickle through to communities it will most affect.
Yes, I mean, I can definitely understand that concern, but for me, when we talk about the law that is already in place, forced marriage, unfortunately, it wasn't on account of age, so it didn't recognise children who were being coerced into marriages. But it's really important to look at the prevention work, because if we just simply consider any convictions and the number of convictions, I think it's already going too far. So if a family is convicted for a forced marriage, it means that it's gone all the way through to the marriage actually taking place. Whereas I would really, really like to see that the law being in place, forced marriage law, and this new law changing the age of marriage, means that there is prevention work happening and that children are learning about their rights and education and training for professionals. And change does take time, but I am confident, as are the campaigners, that as a society we are ready to shift from this law that has been in place since the 1920s. With the right education, conversations like me and you are having today, it's really important that we make that space for it and talk about the harms. And I do believe that as a society we are ready to move on from this.
Yeah, absolutely. Because a lot of people will say there's that risk of pushing this issue further underground, more children taken abroad to marry, and that's something which, like you say, needs to be stopped at the start, rather than talking about prosecutions and things which happen later on.
Yes, exactly. And actually, I'm really glad you mentioned that, because with this law, what we've ensured is that we're not only talking about registered marriages that are happening in registry office, but we're also talking about any religious marriage, any customary marriage, and also children that are taken out of the country to be married or brought to the country to be married. So it's covering the extra territory, and we're trying to ensure that when we tackle this issue, it's taken every single angle of child marriage to just completely eradicate it.
Just before you go, you're raising awareness of this. How can people find more information? What are you doing?
So we do often talk about this issue on our social media. So we have all of our platforms, Instagram, Twitter. We're all at IKWRO, so it's at IKWRO. We also have a fundraising page. You can donate to the important life-saving work that we're doing with girls impacted by this and the services that we're offering. Again, our website is ikwro.co.uk, and if you just follow us on social media, you're able to see the work we're doing and support us. We appreciate it, and we have seen the incredible public support we've gained from this. It's been so tremendous.
Payzee, as always, thank you for spending some time with us, talking about obviously a challenging subject and issue, but something also deeply personal to you as well. So thank you so much for your time. That's Payzee Mahmod, child marriage survivor and campaigner at IKWRO, a women's rights organisation.